What's going on, duelists? It's your boy Nick, bringing you for the first time on the channel a Vendread deck profile for the January 2024 format. For those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name is Nick. We do Yu-Gi-Oh content mainly focused around rogue and casual decks alike. If that's the kind of Yu-Gi-Oh that you're interested in, then I highly encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We're working our way to 1,500 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. We just passed the 1,300 mark, and I want to thank all of you for your continued support. To those of you who have subscribed to the channel and continue to watch all of my content and recommend my videos. So, with the intro out of the way, Vendread. This is a TCG exclusive archetype that came out several years back, right around when FA debuted in the TCG. And Vendread honestly takes a lot of inspiration from not only Resident Evil, but also Spawn. And it's a dark zombie ritual archetype, checks all the boxes for things that I like, and I've been wanting to bring this to the channel for such a long time, but I just kept putting it off. They actually got new support back in Power of the Elements, but it was completely overshadowed by the fact that we also got Tier Elements and Sprite in that set. But like I said, I'm here to bring you Vendread for the first time, and one of the things that I do want to preface before we get started is the fact that I've seen so many other YouTubers post Vendread content and profiles, and I gotta say that in all honesty, clearly I feel like those people haven't invested the time in Vendread that I have, because a lot of those profiles are just downright bad. They're chock full of bricks, situational cards, and or the ratios are just all over the place. I've been so in shock at the amount of content that I've seen around this deck and how much of that content is just terrible, in all seriousness. So hopefully I can get this video out here and you guys can actually look at this and kind of take this as a baseline for what any other Vendread deck should look like moving forward. So like I said, enough of that. We're going to dive headfirst into this 45 card deck list. That's right, it's a 45 card list, not a 50 card list, not a 60 card, zombie pile variant, because those, in my opinion, just aren't that consistent. This is a 45 card list. It gets straight to the point. So with that being said, we're moving in. So you know how we do on the channel, starting with the monster lineup. We are playing 3 copies of Vendread Slayer, who is pretty much the boss monster or the poster child of the theme. Slayer is a level 6 dark zombie ritual monster, 2400 attack, and he can be ritual summoned with any Vendread ritual spell. One of the things that I like about this archetype is that they can be ritualed with any of their spells, and they can also be ritual summoned from the graveyard or the hand, which is a very cool game mechanic or gimmick that I think I've seen only used once before. I think on Necro Cycle, for example. Most ritual archetypes in the game, you have to ritual summon them from the hand along with the appropriate spell. This archetype, though, allows you to do that from the graveyard as well, which I think is so cool, especially with the fact that they are zombies and there's so many decent ways to get these cards in the graveyard. But anyway, when it comes to Slayer specifically, if this card battles an opponent's monster, during damage calculation, quick effect, you get to banish a zombie from your graveyard, and this card gains 300 attack. Now, yes, the attack gain's permanent. However, that's not really the effect that matters much on this card. What matters is the fact that if this card is sent to the graveyard, or this ritual summon card is sent to grave, more specifically, you get to add a ritual spell from the deck to your hand, and if you do, you send a Vendread monster from your deck to the graveyard. This effect is pretty much what makes this deck come full circle. Slayer is the card that you want to open with, you want to ritual summon as often as you possibly can, just so you can abuse this graveyard effect, because it is super powerful for this theme. So that's why we max out on a playset of Slayers. Honestly, a very good card. One of the things that I haven't brought up yet is the other gimmick that Vendread has, is where their non-ritual monsters grant the rituals additional effects if those monsters are attributed from field, which is cool. We'll get into that a little bit later. But up next, we have one Battle Lord. I've seen a lot of lists not play this card, and honestly, I don't understand why. This card not only helps you play through hand traps, because you can banish a Vendread card from your graveyard, declare a type of card, monster, spell, trap, and for the rest of this turn, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects of that type. So assuming you're going first, you could call monsters and just be insulated from hand traps from that point forward. Or once you know the matchup, if you're playing against a back row heavy deck, call trap, for example. But that's a really cool effect in my opinion. Secondly, is that just like Slayer, if this ritual summon card is sent to the graveyard, you can add a ritual monster from the deck to your hand, and if you do, send a Vendread monster from deck to grave. Now, honestly, not as important as Slayer's Grave effect, because you'd rather be adding the ritual spells than adding monsters, but it's still a card that, in my opinion, still deserves a slot as a one-of in this list, and I've seen a lot of lists not play this card, and I think it's honestly the missing piece to their puzzle. A lot of lists I've seen complain about the deck's consistency and whatnot, and I think playing at least one Battlelord is just mandatory. You have to run it, especially for the level that he is, which is 7, which does come up every once in a while. Up next, we have one Scavenger, which is the brand new one that came out of Power the Elements. Really cool card, bases a lot of its inspiration from Nemesis from Resident Evil, which I think is really, really cool. It's a level 8 Dark Zombie Ritual. Can be ritual summoned with any Vendread card, just like Battlelord. I know I didn't mention that, but Battlelord can be ritual summoned with any Vendread card, from the hand or graveyard as well. During the main phase, quick effect, you contribute one other zombie monster, and then this card gains attack equal to the attributed monster's original attack to the end of the turn. So this card helps you with OTKs and put big damage pushes, which I think is great. In addition to that, if you control Vendread Slayer, and this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from the grave but banish it when it leaves the field, keeping in mind that you can only use that graveyard effect assuming the Scavenger was already properly summoned first. But overall, it's just really cool as a one-of. Definitely helps the deck put in for more damage, and like I said, overall, it's a great card. And then we round out the last ritual that we main deck with one copy of Vendread Executor. This is pretty much Slayer on steroids. His name becomes Vendread Slayer while he's on the field. And while this ritual summon card is on the field, your opponent cannot target cards you control with card effects except this card. So he insulates your entire board, including back row, from targeting effects, which I think is cool. And then if this ritual summon card is destroyed by battle or destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can add a Vendread card from the deck to your hand. So, I think if you're going second, you usually want to try and make a Scavenger push. But if you're going first, Executor is something nice to kind of sit on and watch your opponent struggle because he just insulates your entire field, which I think is really cool. So those are the ritual Vendreads that we choose to play. Just 3 Slayer, 1 Battlelord, 1 Scavenger, 1 Executor is the ratio that we're going for. Now up to the Vendread non-rituals. Now, this is where I've seen a lot of discrepancy with the ratios and which cards you should be running, which ones you shouldn't. I'm going to tell you right now, we're just running each of these guys as one-ofs. And yes, I am playing each one. I know some people choose not to play, Striges gets often overlooked, and, sometimes even Core or Anima doesn't get played. I think all these cards deserve a slot as a one-of. Now, the reason why they are one-ofs is because they're not starters, and that's my biggest gripe with these guys, is that they don't actually help you ritual summon or help you get your engine started. All they do is grant additional effects to the rituals when used as tribute from field, with the exception of Scar. He's the one that came out in Power of the Elements. For the most part, they all have an effect to bring themselves out of the graveyard, but each of the ways that they do that is different. So we're just going to go down the list here very quickly. So Scar the Vendread is a level 6 Dark Zombie. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add a Vendread spell trap from your deck to your hand. This is, again, one of the ones that came out in Power of the Elements, so it's more recent. Very great card, honestly. The fact that it now allows you to search their back row is huge because it's something that they never previously had access to. In addition to that, if a monster on the field is tributed, you can banish one other zombie from the graveyard to special summon the Scar out of your grave. However, while the Scar is on the field, you are locked into Vendread monsters, which isn't really a problem because they do have a Link monster that they can summon. But honestly, the reason why we play this as a one-of, because I've seen a lot of lists play 2 or 3, and I think that's just way too bricky. This card is, both of its effects are hard once per turn, so having multiples of it just doesn't do you any benefit, in my opinion, especially when you consider the fact that it's a zombie deck and you have so many ways to get this card to the graveyard. Once you have the one in the grave in rotation, you can constantly just keep reviving it with its own effect anyway. So it's a resource that just keeps coming back over and over, and you never run out of it. So I think playing it as a one-of just makes the most sense from a more consistency standpoint. Up next, we have Revenants. Like I said, Scar is the only one that doesn't grant the Vendread a inherited effect, but the rest of the Vendreads do. But that only happens if they're tributed from the field, which is, I guess, the other downside of the deck. It would be so much better if you could just tribute these guys from anywhere, and they would grant the additional effects to the rituals, but that's not the case. They do have to be on the field. In Revenant's case, the effect that he gives the ritual is that a quick effect. Once per turn, you can target a special summon monster your opponent controls, banish it. That is a really powerful effect to grant one of your ritual monsters, just having the ability to give them additional removal. Yes, it's targeted removal, but it's banishing removal, not destruction, which I think is very, very powerful. In addition to that, Revenant does have an effect to revive himself if he's destroyed by battle or card effect, but then he does get banished when he leaves the field. To be fair, that effect seldom comes up. So we're not even really going to go that far into it. Up next is Hound Horde. Now, Hound Horde, the inherited effect that he gives a Vendread ritual is that once per turn as a quick effect, you can target a spell trap your opponent controls and banish it. So Revenants allows you to banish special summon monsters. Hound Horde allows you to banish spells and traps, which is really, really good because there's a ton of spells, traps in this game that have graveyard effects that you just don't want your opponent to have access to. So making one of your rituals using Hound Horde on field grants that ritual the ability to just quick effect banish spells and traps every single turn, which is absolutely crazy in my opinion. One of the coolest things about this archetype is that you kind of get like this build a boss monster aspect where like you get to pick and choose the types of effects you want the monster to have in addition to its own. I think is really, really cool as far as, you know, poor execution, but the idea of it, you know, they were cooking for a little bit. But Hound Horde, obviously, one of the better cards to actually play because his revive effect is actually quite relevant. If he's in the graveyard, you can discard a Vendread card from hand to special the Hound Horde. He does get banished when he leaves the field, but like I said, that revive effect is actually quite relevant given that most of your Vendreads want to be engraved anyway, so the discard is often not even like cost. Up next, you have Striges. Now, Striges is one that I see a lot of people cut. I don't understand why. Yes, the inherited effect that it gives the ritual is a little lackluster. It says after damage calculation, if this card battled an opponent's monster, you can draw a card and discard a card. Now, yes, that's very situational, but in my opinion, Striges has the best revive effect because if he is sent to grave by any means and from anywhere, he can immediately reveal a Vendread card in your hand and then special summon the Striges, but it does get banished when it leaves the field. But the fact that the Striges, like the only cost is that you just reveal a Vendread in hand, and he revives himself instantly is huge. Like you could normal summon this, like link it off, and as long as you have a Vendread card in hand to reveal, the Striges just comes right back, which I think is really, really cool. So we just play it as a one-of just for that additional extension that he provides every so often. Then we have Core. Core is actually pretty good because the inherited effect he gives the rituals is that the opponent cannot target that card with card effects. So it just gives your rituals targeting protection, which is huge. Yes, if you use Core for an Executor, that means that your opponent cannot target anything on your field, which is really, really crazy. And then Core does have a nice revive effect as well, where he can banish another zombie from grave to special himself, but he does get banished when he leaves. And then the last one here is Anima. Again, a more situational inherited effect, where if you use Anima from field as tribute, the ritual monster can banish any monster destroyed by battle with this card. So basically, you know, if your Slayer, Battlelord, Scavenger, or Executor battle over something and destroy it by battle, it just gets banished instead of going to the graveyard. A little situational, yes, but her first effect is important because while she's in the graveyard, you can target a banished Vendread, except herself, banish the animal from grave, and then special summon that banished Vendread to your field. So that's a really good way to get your banished Vendreads back in rotation, which I think is really cool. The only caveat to that is that you are locked into zombies for the rest of the turn, but in the grand scheme, that's really not that much of a problem. Now, like I said, these cards grant the rituals very cool effects. The only issue I have with them is that none of them are starters or extenders in their own right. Like, a lot of them still require other cards to combo with to be good, and that's why we choose to just play all of these guys as one-ofs. And this is the biggest problem that I've seen with so many different Vendread lists, is that people tunnel on these guys and wind up playing too many copies of them, which just, in my opinion, ends up hurting the deck's overall consistency. So I think one-ofs is all you need for these guys. Yes, I'm aware that a lot of them do banish themselves if you use their revive effects, but we have ways to mitigate that, which we'll talk about as we get deeper into the profile. So that rounds out all the Vendread monsters we're playing. Up next is now some of the generic starters and or extenders that we play. So we're on a playset of Unizombie. Honestly, needs no introduction. Best zombie card ever printed. Foolish Burials cards from deck, and also gets zombies out of your hand. And it's a tuner that modulates levels. I really don't even need to say anything else other than that. Then in addition to that, our other normal summon of choice is a playset of Diviner of the Herald. Like I was saying earlier, one of my biggest problems with Vendread is that none of the monsters actually help you ritual summon. Diviner fixes that problem, because she lets you dump Herald, and Herald lets you search for either a ritual spell or a ritual monster. Sometimes that single search is all you need to get your plays going. So we run the Unizombie and the Diviner package. Also, because Diviner does become a level 6, assuming she dumps Herald, we actually have a card that we can summon off of her, which is a Ret Time Reviver Emitter. It's a level 2 fairy tuner that we can special off of the Diviner effect when she does get tributed for a ritual summon. And then because Emitter's a tuner, and we usually make Slayer, The emitter plus the slayer helps us make level 8 synchros, which is obviously very, very strong. And she does have a really cool graveyard effect where she can target a monster we control and a monster the opponent controls, flip them both face down to special herself, which I think is very strong. Then up next, because this is a zombie deck, we do play a small zombie world package with Doom King. So we do have one Doom King Balladrock. It's just an insane zombie to like foolish from deck, especially if you can't get your Vendread plays off the ground. Doom King is just a very oppressive monster, constantly keeps summoning itself every single standby phase, banishes opponent's cards, can negate effects, assuming you do have Zombie World up. So we do play the one Doom King Balladrock in this list, which I think is really, really nice, followed by the one Al Ghul Mazera, a very powerful generic zombie that we run that not only protects all zombies you control from battle or card effect, but can special summon himself when he's banished from the graveyard and can also modulate his own level. Honestly, a very cool card and a great addition to this deck overall. Then we have Chang-Chi the Spirit Owl. Again, just another really cool zombie extender if banished from grave. Vendreads have a lot of ways to get banished things out of the graveyard, so playing cards like this is really nice because if it's banished, you can banish another zombie from grave to special this card, and then during your main phase while this card's in the field, you can send a zombie from your deck or hand to the graveyard, which is very, very strong. Plus the fact that she's also level 6, just like Slayer, pairs very nicely with some of the plays that we can go into. Then we do play one Necroworld Banshee to give us access to our zombie world, followed by the one copy of Mizuki for the generic Reborn. We do play one Shinobi Necro, which obviously plays very nicely in this deck, since we oftentimes do banish a lot of different things. And then we round that out with the one copy of Glow Up Bloom, again to wrap up our Zombie World package for the deck, which I think is obviously a really cool way to pair Vendreads with, since sometimes, you know, the Vendread rituals do need a little bit of extra installation and push to get them going. And then for the last monster we main deck is just 3 Ash. Obviously pretty generic catch-all for the format, and it's also a zombie, so there are times when Ash can help us trigger certain effects, and we can also banish Ash from grave for some of our other Vendreads, which is pretty cool. So now we're moving on to the spell cards, and this is again where I see a lot of discrepancy between people's lists, and I think where a lot of people tend to lose their way, just like they do with the monster lineup. We are playing 3 copies of Vendread Origin. This is their best ritual spell that they have. Tributes monsters from your hand and or field, but also you can banish zombies from your graveyard whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual you want to summon. Then if your Vendread Slayers you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you get to banish the Origin from the graveyard. So not only is it protection for your main boss monster, but it's also their only ritual spell that is not once per turn, which is absolutely huge in my opinion. So we max out on this card. In my opinion, it is still their best ritual spell. Up next, we have 2 copies of Evolution. I've seen some lists choose not to play this, and I've seen lists play 3, and I've seen lists play 1. I think the best ratio is 2. The reason for that being is 2 things. I know a lot of people complain about this card because the ritual monster that you summon off of it dies during the next end phase. There's a few things wrong with that. You're looking at this card in a wrong light. Think of this card as like an extender. The ritual monster that you summon off of this isn't intended to stay on field. It's more of a stepping stone to help you work towards bigger and better things while getting cards like Slayers in the graveyard to trigger their grave effects so you can continue playing. Plus the card is a hard once per turn, so drawing duplicates does suck. But I think playing 2 of this card, especially because it does let you foolish Vendread from your deck to perform the ritual summon, is worth it enough in its own right in my opinion. So 2 copies of Evolution I think is great. Then we round that out with 1 Ravenous Vendread, the last new card they received out of Power of the Elements. This card, you read it, and it seems amazing. Seems like it fixes all the problems the archetype has. Well, I have news for you guys, it doesn't. Does it help? Yes, but it does not patch all the holes that the deck does unfortunately suffer from. Pretty much what this does is you can special summon a Vendread monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard in face-down defense position except Scavenger, then apply the following effect. You ritual summon any one Vendread ritual monster from your hand or grave by tributing monsters you control, including the monster specialed by this effect, whose total levels equal or exceed the level. So that was a lot of words. Basically, this card's like an E-Telly for a Vendread from deck. You special it face down, and then you tribute it for the ritual summon. 2 things wrong with this card. First thing is, it's a hard once. Just like Evolution, so drawing duplicates of Ravenous does feel bad. Like, because they're hard once per turn, you just can't use them all on the same turn to continue extending. The second reason why we just play 1 of this is because sometimes this card does get a little awkward for us, since if you paid close attention to the effect, you were only able to tribute monsters you control for the ritual summon, including the monster summoned by its first effect. that kind of can mess us up in some cases because we can't use monsters from our hand. We strictly have to use things we control on field, and sometimes we just don't want to. So that's why we just play this card as a one-of. Plus, it's very searchable on the list once you get your engine going. Also, not to mention, this card is a huge Ash target, since it can let you special from deck. They can't Ash this, and you can also Ash the Evolution, which does suck. Like, 2 out of their 3 ritual spells can literally just lose to an Ash, which is a bit unfortunate. That's why I still think playing Origin at 3 is just the best one, because this is the only one that doesn't die to Ash, in my personal opinion. So hopefully that all makes sense to you guys. Up next is just 1 copy of Vendread Knights, which is their field spell. Discard a card, add a Vendread monster from deck to hand. Does have a second effect, but in all seriousness, doesn't even matter. Next up is 1 copy of Vendread Charge. Send any zombie from your hand or face of field to grave, and then you special a Vendread monster from your deck. This is just another way for you to get some of your Vendrads out of the deck and on the board, so you can give their inherited effects to the ritual monsters. Moving on with the rest of the spells, 3 copies of Droplet just for another non-engine slot. Droplet in this deck just goes so hard, only because a lot of the things that you're sending for Droplets cost, you want in the graveyard already to begin with, so playing 3 Droplet just makes sense. And then we round that out with 2 copies of Pre-Prep. Just 2. Again, I'm well aware that Droll is a card that is in the format. You don't want to play into Droll any more than you need to, so I think playing just 2 Pre-Prep instead of 3 just makes sense in all honesty. Plus, I wanted to keep the deck count pretty low at 45. Then we play 1 copy of Zombie World for the Zombie World package, followed by the 1 Foolish Burial to round out the spells. And then if you did your counting, that was 44 cards. The 45th card we're playing is 1 trap, and that is Vendread Revolution. Now, this is a trap that I know most of you choose not to run. However, I'm here to make an argument for its inclusion in the main. 2 things. First thing is you discard a card for cost. That's generally pretty helpful because most of the things, again, you want in grave inherently. Secondly, you target a Vendread monster and a ritual spell in your grave. This can be any Vendread monster. It could be the non-rituals, or it could be the rituals, assuming they were properly ritual summoned already. You special summon that monster in defense, and then you get to add a ritual spell from your grave back to your hand. This is just free recursion at the cost of a discard, which I think is very minor. Like, you're basically getting a monster reborn, and a card back from the graveyard to your hand, which I think is huge. In addition to that, the graveyard effect is even more cracked, because you can banish this card from your graveyard to target up to 5 banished zombies, shuffle them into the deck, and then draw 1 card. So helping you recycle some of your Vendrads that do ultimately get banished over the course of the game by their own effects. I think playing this card as a one-of, especially since it's searchable with Scar, is very, very helpful at allowing this deck to have that grind game and that longevity it needs over the course of a duel. So that rounds out the main deck, guys. Now we're going to quickly dive into the monsters in the extra deck, of which you play 1 Herald of the Arclight, simply for our Diviner play. Obviously, when it's sent to the graveyard, it just helps you search for either ritual spells or ritual monsters. We play 1 copy of Immortal Dragon, a level 6 zombie synchro tuner that allows you to Foolish Burial zombies from deck, and then its level changes based on the difference of the level of the monster you sent. Very cool card, in my opinion. Can also revive itself from grave whenever a zombie monster is destroyed by battle. Up next, 1 copy of Excel Synchro Stardust. This card is very powerful since we do play a lot of level 2 tuners like Diviner and the Time Reviver Emitter. Helps you make some level 10 synchros, which is obviously very strong. 1 copy of Psyframe Lord Omega. Again, very good card. Rips cards out of the opponent's hands, recycles your banished cards back to your graveyard, and then has an amazing graveyard effect in its own right. 1 copy of Skeletal Dragon Felgrand. Again, allows you to banish monsters from the field or graveyard upon special summon, and if a monster is revived from the graveyard, you can target a monster in the field and negate its effects to the end of the turn. Very cool utility piece there. Then we do have 1 Red-Eye Zombie Dragon Lord that we can make. This card is also very strong, just as a quick effect on your opponent's turn. Reviving any zombie from the graveyard is just huge. Then we also play 1 Bestial Dissipator, which is usually what we're making off of our Excel Synchro Stardust line. Dissipator in this deck is just absolutely cracked. Not only does it help special summon your banished Vendrads back to your field so they can get them back in rotation again, you can even shuffle banished Vendrads back into the deck to, interrupt your opponent on their turn when they activate monster effects, which is obviously very powerful. So 1 Dissipator is all you need. Then for the rank 6s, it was very hard not to include Beatrice in this, but we chose not to after doing a lot of testing. I just felt like we have plenty of other ways to foolish stuff in this deck that we just didn't need another card that did the same thing. So we choose to play Wallow, the founder of the Judge Dragons, and 1 Dampier Vampire Sheridan for the removal, and then Wallow for the Graveyard Disruption. Then we move on to the links. 2 copies of Add Vendread Savior. Very powerful generic link 2 for this deck. helps recycle Vendread cards from grave back to hand, and Foolish Burial zombies from deck to grave during damage step for cost, which is obviously really, really cracked. And because his name becomes Slayer on field, you can use Origin to protect it, which makes it a very sticky Link 2 to remove off of the board. Then we play one copy of Vampire Sucker, one Vampire Fascinator to, help reborn some of your opponent's guys to your field and also steal some of their cards. And then we also play one copy of Yukiona, the Icicle Mayakashi, for the negation that it provides. And we round out the extra deck with one Yukiona, the Absolute Zero Mayakashi, again for the additional negation and attack reduction that she also provides. So that rounds out the extra deck, guys. Before we wrap up the video, I'm going to show you guys the side deck, which again is honestly up to personal preference, but this is the side deck that I have been using for this deck, and it's been working out pretty good. So we sideboard a playset, excuse me, of Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. Very good card in this upcoming format, in my opinion. We also play one copy of Elder Entity Entis. For those games where we are forced to go second, we can use this as to side in place of the Herald. That way Diviner can turn into removal if needed. Then we also, sometimes going second sucks, so we just have the playset of Dark Rulers. For the back row matchups, we do double Twin Twister. The discard in this deck is actually quite good, so we don't mind discarding a card for that cost. Then, because we oftentimes are forced to go second and we want to steal the opponent's stuff to use it as tribute fodder, for our ritual plays, we have two copies of Zombie Necronize and a Change of Heart. Zombie Necronize is a pretty cool card, although it does have a little bit of a situational cost in the sense where you need to have a level 5 or higher zombie on the field before you can activate it, which can come up, but oftentimes it isn't really a problem. It does have a nice graveyard effect, though, where you can target a banished zombie, set this card from your graveyard back to your field, and then shuffle that zombie back into the deck from the banish zone, which is pretty cool. Then to round out the rest of the side, we play the second copy of Zombie World for the matchups that we know are hurt by this. You just want to have the second Zombie World to have. Then we also sideboard one Vendread Reorigin. This card is also pretty good. I thought about mainboarding it in place of the other Vendread trap we're running, but this one is just a little bit situational since it can only tribute monsters that have a level, so it really doesn't do anything against like Xyz decks and or decks that like to link climb a lot. So that's why we sideboard this, but it is nice removal. And then we round out the last card on the side with one copy of Return of Zombies. Just really good removal of Zombie Worlds established, and it has the same graveyard effect that Zombie Necronize has, allowing you to recycle some of your banished zombies. So that's going to wrap up my Vendread deck list for the January 2024 format. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that profile and, like I said, liked kind of the explanations that I gave for my reasonings behind some of the ratios. If you guys want to see combos and test hands, chime down in the comments below. Like I said, this deck does have some really sweet combos, so if you guys want to see that, make sure you let me know down in the comments. But with that being said, like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of my uploads, and this is Nick, hitting that end phase. Peace.